A man rejects eternal life in heaven and descends into hell to save humanity from the end of the world. In 1876, in the state of Utah, a man named Otis Korborb ventures into the Red Creek mine. Rumors say it's long been abandoned, but Otis is desperate to uncover the gold hidden within. As a lunar eclipse darkens the sky, a gateway to hell suddenly opens inside the mine. Stunned, Otis peers into the fiery chasm and reaches toward it, only for his hand to burst into flames. Panicked, he manages to extinguish the fire, but as he gazes back into the infernal abyss, a mysterious entity emerges and lunges straight at his face. Otis struggles to free himself, but the entity forces its way into his body, searing a fiery circle into his chest from the inside. Moments later, Otis falls eerily still. Suddenly, he rises, his eyes black as coal. It's clear the dark force has taken over his body and mind. A month later, in Wyoming, Sheriff Roy Pulsifer heads to the train station to meet his daughter Charlotte and her fiancé Angus, who are set to marry in a few days. Roy feels a twinge of jealousy toward Angus, but Charlotte reassures him that she's truly happy. Their reunion is abruptly interrupted by the arrival of the armed Samuel Brothers gang. Chaos erupts as the gang opens fire. Roy leaps into action without hesitation but is struck by a bullet in the back. At that very moment, Roy is enveloped by a brilliant light and finds himself in the waiting room of the afterlife. A cheerful young woman named Hano greets him, already familiar with his file. Disoriented, Roy tries to make sense of what's happening. Hano explains that the light he saw was heaven, and the horrifying realization dawns on Roy: he's dead. Desperate, he asks about Charlotte, but Hano assures him there's no record of her in their system, meaning she's alive. Hano also reveals that Roy passed away 3 days ago, but the decision about his soul's fate took time. Ultimately, it was decided that Roy would join the R.I.P.D, the Rest in Peace Department. Hano explains to the bewildered sheriff that the R.I.P.D recruits soldiers, warriors, and lawmen worthy of serving in God's private police force, tasked with hunting down deados, criminal souls that have escaped judgment and remained on Earth. The department's mission is to find them and send them to hell. However, deados are far from harmless spirits. They possess human bodies, gaining the power to wreak havoc. Hano leads Roy to the armory and offers him a selection of weapons. Roy insists on using his trusty revolver, but Hano explains that ordinary guns are useless against deados. Instead, their special firearms can send any soul straight to hell with a single headshot. Hano also mentions that deados bear a fiery brand on their chest after possession, a telltale sign of their corruption. Roy is assigned to investigate Red Creek, the site of a hellish eruption a month earlier, a location he knows well. Excited by the chance to return to Earth and see his daughter, Roy agrees, but Hano warns him that he won't come back to life. Undeterred, Roy signs the contract without reading it. Instantly, a six-pointed star is seared onto his chest. He steps into an otherworldly elevator as Hano informs him he has only 2 days until the prophesied end of days. Moments later, Roy lands in a restroom in the middle of a field. As he stumbles out, a herd of bison stampedes past him. As Roy tries to regain his bearings, he's approached by his new partner, none other than Joan of Arc, who explains that Hano assigned her to keep an eye on him. Roy isn't thrilled about having a babysitter and insists that he'll be in charge since he's older. Joan counters with a smirk, pointing out that in the afterlife, experience matters far more, and while Roy's been dead for just 3 days, she's been at it for 445 years. Frustrated, Roy rushes to his old home to see Charlotte. But just as he starts speaking to her, Joan appears and drags him into the woods. She reminds him that they have a job to do, but Roy angrily declares that no one can stop him from seeing his daughter. The argument escalates into a brawl. Joan, skilled and experienced, easily overpowers Roy and leads him to his own grave. She calmly explains that his family has already buried him, and to avoid confusing the living, they've both been given entirely new appearances. Joan hands Roy a mirror, and he's horrified to see that he now looks like a young black woman, just like his partner. Roy is disheartened that he won't be able to speak with Charlotte, but Joan reminds him that they've been given a chance to set things right in the world, not to return to their old lives. Still confused and frustrated, Roy asks why they were made black in a town known for its intolerance. People might not even talk to them. Joan, ever resourceful, suggests they introduce themselves as mercenary sisters, believing this guise will command respect. Despite Joan's warnings, Roy stubbornly decides to visit his daughter, hoping she might recognize him by his voice. Joan shatters his hope, explaining that whatever he says to Charlotte will sound like gibberish to her. Furious at the injustice, Roy vents his frustration. Their argument is interrupted when Henry, Roy's friend, approaches his grave. Roy freezes, unsure of what to say, but Joan takes the lead. She introduces herself as Matilda and Roy as her mute sister, Mabel, explaining that the late sheriff once helped them fix a broken wagon, and they've come to pay their respects. Henry fondly reminisces about Roy, admitting he was a tough but good man. He also shares grave news: the town is struggling without him. The Samuel Brothers gang, responsible for Roy's death and Charlotte's fiancé Angus's abduction, continues to wreak havoc. Fortunately, 3 of the 5 gang members have been captured and are awaiting execution. Roy, now fueled by a desire for vengeance and to save Angus, announces his intent to take down the gang. Joan insists their mission is in Red Creek, hunting deados, but Roy ignores her and sets off to confront the criminals. Joan reluctantly follows, and the duo tracks the prison wagon transporting the gang members. Roy recalls shooting the gang leader, meaning there should only be 4 brothers left. However, as the wagon approaches, they spot a fiery brand on the leader's chest, a clear sign he's a deado. Worse, the others are too. Joan, still disguised as Matilda, steps into the road, claiming her sister is injured and begging the federal marshals for help, offering payment in return. Once she lures a few marshals into the forest, the sisters ambush them, then swiftly take down the rest by the wagon. One marshal shoots Roy, but when Roy instantly recovers, the terrified man flees. Roy tries to break open the cage holding the deados but can't. Joan suggests using holy water to destroy the gang leader and unlock the cage from within. As soon as a single drop of holy water lands on the deado's body, the soul possessing him erupts outward, transforming into a massive, monstrous entity. The monstrous entity from the deado's soul shreds the cage apart. Without hesitation, Roy fires his special pistol, banishing it back to hell. As the second brother raises his weapon to shoot, Joan swiftly takes him down with a precise strike of her sword. The only one left alive is the adopted brother, Slim Samuels. Joan decides to interrogate him, but Roy's attention is drawn to a wanted poster. It accuses Slim of being the one who shot him. Enraged, Roy lunges at Slim, who vehemently denies pulling the trigger. Joan intervenes, using holy water to coerce him into talking. Even under the threat of torture, Slim insists on his innocence and offers to cooperate instead. Joan halts the soul's release, and Slim confesses that a more powerful deado, Otis Korborb, forced him and the other possessed brothers to abduct people and transport them to Red Creek under threat of destruction. Roy finally admits their pursuit of the gang was not in vain. Joan, however, is puzzled. She wonders why a deado would fear another deado, as they supposedly can't destroy each other. Slim explains that Otis possesses a special weapon, one akin to the hunter's arsenal. This revelation unsettles both Roy and Joan, hinting at Otis's sinister plans. Taking Slim as a hostage, Roy and Joan head for Red Creek. Meanwhile, Otis confides in one of his minions, Nell, about his escape from hell. He recounts slipping through purgatory during a lunar eclipse, which temporarily weakened a fragment of the gates. Now, with tonight's arrival of the blood moon, the lunar cycle will culminate, rendering all gates weak and vulnerable at midnight. This event will give damned souls 6 hours to escape hell and possess the bodies of the abducted humans. Failure means waiting another 25 years for the gates to weaken again. But Otis has no intention of waiting. He declares he's grown tired of the eternal struggle for power in hell and plans to bring hell to earth. As preparations in Red Creek intensify, Otis gathers the kidnapped individuals. He orders his mercenaries to fit them with gas masks and feed them well to ensure they have the strength needed to open the gates. Amidst the commotion, one of the surviving Samuel brothers approaches Otis, expressing his desire to abandon the mission. In a fit of rage, Otis rips the soul from the traitorous Samuel brother's chest and banishes it to hell with a single shot from his gun. As evening approaches, Roy, Joan, and Slim arrive in the eerily deserted Red Creek. They notice the remaining residents coughing strangely. In the town, they encounter Julius Butterfield, the mayor and owner of nearly every business in town. Deciding to stay in his hotel, they face Julius's blatant racism, as he refuses to host people of color. However, when the sisters threaten him with their weapons, he quickly changes his tune, ordering a black servant, Beverly, to escort them to their room. Beverly notices a birthmark on Slim's hand and remarks that his gang had stayed there several times before. The sisters insist Slim won't cause any trouble, but Beverly reveals that she's not afraid of him, as he was the kindest of the brothers. Suddenly, Beverly starts coughing, and Joan inquires about the illness affecting everyone in the town. Beverly explains that no one knows for sure, but it began about a month ago. Joan then asks about the missing townspeople. Beverly tells them that Julius claimed a gold vein was found nearby, and people rushed off to mine it. However, the companions find it strange that Julius didn't go himself, which hints that he's lying. Soon after, Beverly leaves, and Joan spots a mine on a nearby mountain, deducing that the residents' coughing is caused by toxic gases. Meanwhile, in the mine, dozens of hostages are trapped, forced to breathe through masks to avoid poisoning from the deadly fumes. Back in Red Creek, Otis prepares everything for opening the gates of hell. Julius, coughing more severely now, begs Otis for a mask, reminding him of all the help he's given. Otis coldly refuses, stating that the masks are reserved for workers and offers Julius the chance to join the ranks of the deados instead. Julius desperately resists, pleading for his life and even suggesting that Otis take his new guests instead. Reluctantly, Otis hands him a mask, but then shoves him into a cart, intending to take him to the other hostages.
Otis, please!
At the hotel, Roy and Jean continue to interrogate Slim, wanting to find out where Otis is holding the kidnapped people. Slim reveals they were taken to a church, but he doesn't know anything else. The partners want to get rid of him, but Slim insists he's not as bad a deado as his brothers and claims he could still be useful to them. Despite his plea, Jean and Roy tie him up and leave him at the hotel while they head to the church. Inside the church, the partners find a terrible mess and realize Slim wasn't lying. Suddenly, they hear screams for help and find Julius in a wagon. The mayor explains that Otis and his followers have taken all the town's residents and transported them to an old mine where the gates of hell are supposed to open. Jean suspects that poisonous gas is leaking through the gates from the depths of hell and explains to Roy that Otis is using these people to bring the souls of the damned back to Earth, turning them into deados. Over time, their numbers will grow, and they will eventually conquer the world, bringing about the end of times. However, the deados themselves can't summon souls to Earth, only living people can. This is what they plan to do when they start digging up the gates. Suddenly, Otis's henchmen attack Roy and Jean, locking them in cages with the other hostages. Meanwhile, at the Beverly Hotel, Julius, gasping from the poison gas, searches for a document that confirms Slim didn't shoot the sheriff and that Julius framed him. She frees Slim, who finds a mask for her, along with a few others for the people still in town. Slim then sets out to rescue Roy and Jean, who are imprisoned. Jean spots Nell and realizes where the deados got their weapons. It turns out the R.I.P.D once tried to recruit her, but she robbed their weapons stash and fled. At that moment, Angus tries to break out of the mine but is quickly defeated and locked in a cage with Roy and Jean. The sheriff recognizes him and starts talking to him, momentarily forgetting his new appearance. Somehow, Roy manages to get Angus talking. He explains that he plans to marry the most beautiful woman and wants to be the kind of husband to her that Roy was as a father. Soon, the gates start weakening, and Otis releases all the hostages from their cages. He tells Roy and Jean he will throw them into the abyss just before the gates close, so they won't get in the way of his rule over the world. As the digging continues, the ground splits open, revealing a hellish chasm. Souls burst forth and possess the unfortunate hostages. Roy asks if it's possible to close the gates, and Jean replies that, first, the hellfire must be extinguished. She recalls that, while still alive, she found a vial of Christ's tears in a ruined church in Orleans. Those tears will put out the fire and close the gates. Meanwhile, Slim arrives at the mine, initially pretending to be a regular deado, threatening to shoot Roy and Jean, but then unexpectedly shooting Otis's henchmen. Before freeing the partners, Slim shows Roy a fake wanted poster of himself. It turns out Julius had printed these at his printing press to frame Slim for the sheriff's murder, though in reality, Julius had taken care of the sheriff himself. After escaping captivity, Jean asks Roy to pour Christ's tears into the heart of the hellfire, and then the gates will close, sucking everything in. The sheriff offers to go with her, but she's too terrified of the fire, as she was once burned at the stake. Slim continues to put on a show in front of Otis, pretending to push Roy into the abyss. He leads the sheriff to the edge so he can close the gates, then shoots the new deados. He tries to kill Otis too, but even the special weapon doesn't affect him. Roy is forced to focus on the abyss and fend off the deados. Jean, realizing that everything now depends on her, decides to overcome her fear, jumping through the fire and pouring Christ's tears. The gates begin to close, sucking in all the deados. However, Otis, now in a terrifying form, remains on Earth. Jean realizes that the creature inhabiting him is the right hand of the devil himself. Jean discovers that she's lost the vial of tears, and they try to use their weapons against the devil's assistant, but it's futile. He splits into multiple entities and attacks Jean, but fortunately, Roy finds the vial with a few drops left. The sheriff pours them into the cartridges and shoots at the demonic entity, which finally vanishes from the earth. In the morning, the surviving townspeople, including Angus, return to the city. Jean and Roy visit Julius at the hotel to settle scores with him, just as Beverly and Slim are escorting him out. Julius admits that when Otis took over the town, he ran away and tried to leave, but the Samuel brothers gang happened to kidnap people right where his train had stopped. He didn't want to be taken, so he decided to shoot the gang. However, he mistakenly shot the sheriff and, to avoid taking responsibility, framed Slim as the weakest member of the gang. Roy appoints Slim as the new sheriff, with Beverly as his deputy, and they arrest Julius. Afterward, Roy and Jean head to Charlotte and Angus's wedding. Charlotte doesn't understand a word of what her father wants to say, but he manages to hug her one last time, even though he's in Mabel's form. Soon after, Jean and Roy find themselves near the booth in the field, preparing to return to the afterlife. Roy thanks his partner and says goodbye, planning to leave R.I.P.D, but Jean reminds him that according to his contract, he has to serve 100 years, so they still have many more assignments ahead. Would you want the chance to return to Earth after leaving this life? What would you do if you had that opportunity? Share your thoughts in the comments down below, hit the like button, and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.